An air crash in India, one of the country's worst aviation incidents in decades. What went wrong? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu and this is The Heat. The Air India plane, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, plowed into a medical college moments after takeoff. More than 240 people were on board and many on the ground also died. One person survived the tragic crash in Ahmedabad in western India. We begin with this report from Ravinder Bawa.
Shocking news that came in this afternoon and has actually especially for the passengers, especially for the families who are in Ahmedabad, who were bidding goodbye to their relatives who were leaving for Gatwick, did not know that this is going to be their last goodbye, and it's a painful goodbye for them, and it's going to stay with them forever. And it's important because now most of the people on board are no more, and only one survivor is something which we are getting information as confirmed. It's a little while back the Home Minister spoke about this, and he said it was difficult to save anybody in the kind of situation it was. And looking at the visuals, one can clearly say that when this aircraft, which was full of fuel, which caught fire, of course there will not just be damage to the aircraft and the passengers inside, but also on the building which it fell. A number of students who were in the building on which this aircraft fell was graduating for medicine, and they are right now, many of them are being treated in the hospital. Some deaths are also being reported, but yet no confirmation on how many students who were present in that building in the afternoon for lunch have lost their lives. So that's still awaited. In the meantime, the investigations are on. As far as the support from international community, the United States National Transportation Safety Board is sending a team. The UK is sending a team. The Boeing is now with Air India, and the Director General of Civil Aviation here are also investigating this, why and how this transpired, especially when the plane took off from the runway, and within a minute it crashed. So that is being investigated, and it's very important because now the whole search, apart from the rescue operations concluding, now that it is being said that most of the people on board have lost their lives, so now the search is for the black box to find out what happened, because the black box will have the voice recordings as well as digital data recording, which will then be decoded to find out in that 1 minute or less than 1 minute what happened inside the aircraft, that the mayday call was given by the pilot, and by the time the ATC could respond, there was silence on the other hand.
Okay, let's bring in our panel from New Delhi. Amit Singh is an aviation safety analyst here in our studio. Berman is a former chief of major investigations at the US National Transportation Safety Board. From New Jersey, JP Tristani is a former commercial airline pilot and an aeronautical engineer. And also with us, Chidanand Rajghatta is the foreign editor and US bureau chief of the Times of India. Welcome to all of you. Ben, let's start right here in the studio. As I said, you led major investigations at the US National Transportation Safety Board. You were a pilot, you are a pilot, you were a captain for one of the major airlines here in the United States. From what we have seen, from what we know and your experience, what do you think happened here?
Well, it's really too early to know, of course.
Yeah.
And when we get the recorder information, we'll know a lot more. But some of the details that we could glean from the videos and from particularly including the sound of the videos seem to suggest that the takeoff roll itself looked pretty normal to me. And then the nose rotating up, the beginning of the takeoff looked normal. And then just a few seconds after takeoff, when the airplane was still not very high in the sky, something radical changed and the airplane lost energy. I don't know that it lost its thrust, its engine power. That's one big possibility. It also could have lost lift in some other ways, as we'll all discuss today, right now. But we won't know for sure what exactly happened, but something big happened right after takeoff. And then you saw the result with the airplane sinking down. It looked like also the plane was landed, crash landed, seemingly under control by the flight crew. It looked to me like they were putting control inputs and trying to minimize the impact as they came down. And so we don't know what happened. Well, we know what happened. We don't know exactly why, and hopefully that'll become clearer soon.
And Ben, at that stage, I mean, that's the beginning of the flight. It's taking off. The plane then is full with fuel, right?
Yes, sir.
So that's what caused that major explosion when it crashed.
Yes, it doesn't take actually that much fuel to cause an explosion, but this one had plenty. There was a lot on board.
And that would have caused the...
it caused the big fireball and fire.
And
yes.
Casualties on the ground as well.
Yes, the impact and the fire, yes, sir.
Right, let's go to Amit Singh in New Delhi. Amit, great to have you with us. Of course, there's a great deal of speculation right now. What caused this? What caused that plane to go down? And many online experts, one of the theories we're hearing right now, I should say that the flaps and the slats that help lift the plane at relatively low speeds were not extended. There is also speculation that the pilots did not retract the takeoff and landing gear when it took off. I mean, is there anything to that?
Well, there are two videos. The first one is the takeoff roll till the liftoff, and second one is the airborne aircraft till it crashes into the ground into a fireball. The one with the takeoff, at the end of the takeoff roll, you see a plume of dust which blows when the vortex is created as the aircraft lifts off. And if you see the flight radar plot also, the aircraft lifts off towards the end of the runway, towards the edge. So that is an area of concern. If the aircraft took off from an intersection, were the speeds calculated correctly, were the flap settings correct? While flight radar says they were using full length, then that is a bigger concern. The aircraft were using the full length, why did it rotate at the end of the runway? So that is one thing. Second is, as you said, the landing gear was not retracted. Normally, when we take off in the first 5 seconds, we put the landing gear up. That's the normal case. But if there is something which distracts the crew at the takeoff roll or just after getting airborne, then there's a likelihood that they forget to raise the landing gear. So what was it that caused the aircraft to delay the rotation until they reach the end of the runway and then forget the landing gear? Did something happen before or just a few seconds after liftoff? So that is the area that is of concern. Second is the slats. I can see in the videos that the slats are extended and the flaps are at takeoff minimal, which cannot be discerned from a distance, so we cannot make out. So if the slats are extended, most likely the flaps are also extended, unless there is a retraction, uncommanded retraction of the flaps. We don't know the technical status of the aircraft, what all snags were persisting from previous flight. The aircraft had come from Delhi to Ahmedabad. Then onwards, she was scheduled to go to Gatwick. So I do see the slats extended very clearly. So in all probability, the flaps are also extended. So there is something which caused the thrust to reduce so that it could not sustain the flight in air and steadily marched into the ground. You can see the aircraft nose going up. Probably the pilots are trying to remain airborne as much as possible or to avoid the building. So that could be a possibility. But what prevented the aircraft to sustain flight, that is the area of concern. That is probably the thrust.
Right. JP Tristani, great to have you with us as well. You know, shortly after this plane left the ground, the pilots radioed a mayday call to the air traffic controllers on the ground. And what we know is that the pilots did not respond to the messages that were coming from air traffic control to the plane. What can we deduce from that?
Well, there were two reports. The first report said that the pilots called a mayday, but there was a later report that states that the pilot stated engine failure. Now, looking at that video, that's a normal rotation. The aircraft starts its climb. The gear does not retract, which is unusual. But within 30 seconds, it tops its climb right about at 625 feet on flight radar. Then all of a sudden, it starts a controlled descent. That's a total flight time of 1 minute. The question is, did both engines fail or only one engine fail? He just states engine failure. Let's suppose that only one engine failed. The one survivor said that right after the aircraft began rotation, he heard a bang. So let's suppose a compressor stall on one engine. Now he's got one engine operating. There is a question that could be answered in the simulator very quickly. You take that same aircraft, you've loaded up with the same amount of fuel, passenger loads, the outside air temperature, the altitude of the field, all of those into consideration. And is it possible for that 787 with one engine operating, with the gear down, is it possible to maintain flight? There would be a question in my mind from previous aircraft that I've also been engaged as a test pilot, whether that is possible. The only way that could be ascertained is, first of all, Boeing would have the charts that tell you a single engine operation, if the gear is not retracted at a specific gross weight, the possibility of that aircraft flying out of that engine failure, single engine failure, would be negligible or possible. And it can be easily duplicated in a simulator.
Right, and JP, at that stage, is the plane fully under the control of the pilots, or is there any engagement by the autopilot as it takes off?
Well, first of all, the 787 Dreamliner, from a pilot that flies it that I recently spoke to this before coming on the show, is that if a single engine failed, there is a system within it that automatically would engage the rudders so that there would be no other adverse yaw or proverse yaw. In other words, the aircraft would remain straight and level, just as it did. So that auto function is in the 787 that may have occurred. It's going to come down to, when he called out engine failure, well, how many engines failed? Because that last video that I looked at, top of climb, wings level, starts its descent. It looks like it's gliding in for just a normal landing. No other inputs, no other call outs. And now we have a problem that, in my mind, again, I say, whether the 787 at that configuration, fuel load, passenger load, altitude, temperatures, is it capable of flying on a single engine with the gear remaining down? The gear was never retracted and never extended. Throughout that video, from liftoff, top of climb, into its descent, the gear remains down. Now, think about it, though. If you talk about pilot, these are highly trained pilots. Air India does a good job. Never heard anything against them. And so within that one space of time, one engine, and whether the aircraft can maintain flight, which apparently it cannot, it's going to come down to how many engines were out. One or both. Both, to me, would be an extreme case. A single engine out, sure, that's a possibility. And with that bang that the lone survivor stated he heard right after nose rotation, well, an engine failure, an explosion in the engine, I've had one, cored out the entire engine, or just a simple compressor stall where it lost power and shut down.
Okay, Ben, I want to get to you in a moment, but Chidanand, first let me ask you, Air India is a huge airline. It used to be a state-owned airline, and then it was privatized in 2022. What kind of a safety record does it have?
I think it's pretty decent. I mean, it's not the worst airline. It has consistently, renewed its fleet. I believe these 787s were bought around 2007, 2008, starting 2007, 2008. And in fact, I went to Seattle to Boeing in Everett when the first planes were rolling off the assembly line, Boeing wanted to show off their plane. They were very proud of the 787.
Right.
You know, it was supposed to be super efficient, very fuel efficient, very light, with a lot of composite material.
We have a picture of you in Seattle at that time when you visited.
Yeah.
So this was Boeing showing off its...
Yeah, when the Dreamliner was first introduced, I believe it was 2007, July of 2007 when I visited. And Air India consistently has renewed and replenished its fleet, and now you know, it's now been taken over. It used to be state airline, and once upon a time it was very highly regarded.
Right.
It went through some bad years, but I don't think its accident track record was you know, bad at all. But yeah, the Tatas, which is a very well-regarded group in India, took over you know, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and they have tried to sort of you know, ramp it up.
Yeah.
The thing with the flying, civil aviation has grown vastly in India. You know, passenger traffic has grown immensely. I mean, India and China are some of the biggest customers, you know, for Boeing and Airbus. And there are huge number of aircraft orders, a lot of aircraft. I mean, India is full of shiny new airports, incredibly modern airports. Ahmedabad, though, is not one of the busiest cities. I don't think it even ranks in the top 6. You know, the traffic there is pretty light, and I don't think that has anything to do at all, you know,
with what happened.
With what happened.
Okay.
But I did notice, though, that it's a direct flight from Ahmedabad to Gatwick.
Yes.
And these are all new routes, actually, because there's a large Indian Gujarati diaspora in London now. So there are a lot of new routes, and it's incredibly tragic that you know, something like this happened.
Ben, you wanted to add something to what JP was saying about what could have happened on the plane.
Yes, thank you. First, I wanted to just say how sad I am about the loss of life, and both for the passengers and crew on board the aircraft and then for the people on the ground. The ground situation hits home because my daughter is a medical intern also here in the States, but it hits very close to home, so I feel so bad for everyone's loss. As far as the crash went, I think that if it was a loss of engine thrust, which is not proven yet, to me it looks like a loss from both engines. I don't see a signature that I would expect to see from a single engine failure. So if it was a loss of both engines, then of course this is where the investigation will get very deep and may last a while, because it could be one of many things, but really it's very difficult to snuff out both jet engines at the same time on an airline jet.
So that's a very rare occurrence that both engines...
It's rare, and the reason it is because there's a tremendous amount of redundancy built in, a tremendous amount of independence built into these engines, so that there are very few things that can affect both at the same time. I mean, the one that immediately comes to mind is fuel contamination. If you have bad fuel and it goes into both tanks, well, then you can get both engines failed at the same time. So it could be, and there have been incidents. There was an incident with a 787 several years ago in Japan where fuel contamination occurred not from pumping it in from the fuel farm, but a certain substance had been used to clean the tanks and put a biocide in the tanks, and that ended up clogging up some key parts of both jet engines. So one failed and then the other failed. The airplane landed safely because they came back with power. But anyways, it's that kind of thing that has to affect both engines at the same time. It almost never happens because there's so many built-in safeties to it.
Yeah.
But to me, it looks like that if it's a loss of thrust, that may be more likely.
Amit Singh, you know, as I said, there was one person that survived this crash, and he said that he heard noises before the crash. Could this indicate that there was some kind of mechanical failure?
Yeah, there's a possibility, and I'd like to quote another near accident in 2017. In fact, it was 21st June. A Go Air 320 was taking off from New Delhi, and soon after takeoff, they had aborted compressor stall on engine number 2. But the co-pilot called out N1. Reading out the parameters for engine 2, the captain thought it was engine number 1. So they had to burn it on engine number 2, and they shut down engine number 1. That is right over Delhi, populated Delhi. And luckily, they realized the mistake and were able to restart the engine number one. Otherwise, the aircraft would have gone down over Delhi, and that would have been disastrous. So similarly here, if there are a number of incidents of bird hits over Ahmedabad. In fact, all over India, the number of bird hits have been increasing. So if there was a bird hit on one engine and could be the wrong engine was shut down, so probably they have both engines down. British Midlands had it, and the ATR in Taipei. So that is a possibility that if the passengers heard a thud or a bang, there could be a compressor stall or shutdown of one engine.
Right.
And in some sort of panic, they shut down the wrong engine. And that probably be the case. The aircraft would have gone down the way it has gone down.
Yeah. Okay, JP.
And another thing I'd like to correct, the flight radar data, what everybody's talking about, 625 feet. Flight radar, the reference is the standard 1013. And that day, the QNH, the pressure was 1001. So if you correct that, the aircraft on ground, if you see the flight radar, would read 540 feet.
Right.
So that is the datum that you should compare the flight data on the flight radar 24.
Right.
So 625 would be 625 minus 540.
Yeah. JP, what are your thoughts on the likelihood of mechanical failure?
A mechanical failure of what? The flight control system or the engines? You have, obviously, an aircraft, whether it went up to 500 feet or 600 feet is irrelevant. The aircraft topped out at that altitude. The pilot clearly called out, according to the aviation people in India, engine failure. How many engines failed? The other probability of the individual who maintained that it could have been a causal factor in the fuel contamination. Yes, it depends upon whether the fuel was checked in either the underground tank that they loaded it from or a tanker alongside the aircraft, but those things are generally checked for any type of water content, etc. But the pilots examine a possibility that fuel contamination. It wouldn't have killed both engines immediately on the flight control systems, but it could have controlled or rather failed one engine first and then the other engine. And as I stated, the automatic yaw damper system that kicks in, that keeps the plane straight and level, all that could have happened. But I don't really look at the possibility or the probability, which is extreme, that both engines were out. I look at that aircraft and the flight pattern and what they had to accomplish in less than 1 minute, that whatever happened insofar as the engine is concerned, if the pilot clearly identified he had an engine out, and the aircraft was operating on one engine, and that landing gear was still hanging down, I do know positively from flying previously the MD-80 aircraft that you cannot, with the gear down, successfully fly that aircraft on one engine. With a gross weight of a certain amount that would be near the maximum. So that again remains a consideration. To me, that both engines went out is not in a realm of probability. Possibility, yes. But the one engine out, and the way that aircraft is being flown, it looks like it just, if I saw that video, the first video, without knowing that the aircraft had crashed, I would think someone was taking a video of an aircraft coming in for a normal landing.
Okay, I'm going to move on here, JP. I'm going to move on to Chidanand. You know, you've got a tragedy like this, but there's always a political dimension to it. I mean, will there be questions being raised now with India's regulatory authorities and, you know, their involvement in this and what kind of things they monitor on aircraft like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there'll be a, you know, a complete sort of examination of all systems. You know, like our fellow panelists said, it's going to be a long investigation. We're not going to know everything. But it does, you know, cross my mind that, you know, we've had an extraordinary number of aviation accidents this year, including in the U.S. I mean, literally, you turn around and every day there seems to be an accident. We had one in Washington, D.C. What I do know is, flying still remains the safest mode of transport, in terms of casualty per passenger mile. I mean, there's a greater chances of us, driving out from here and, having a crash than air crash. But it does point to the sheer volume of air traffic now across the world, and even in the U.S. we have had so many accidents. I was actually reminded, as we were speaking, that very early in my career I covered an air crash in Bangalore, my hometown, and that was a brand new Airbus 320, which crashed on February 14th. I remember the date very well for obvious reasons, 1989. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's a history of crashes, but by and large, flying is still the safest mode of transport. That's well established, and this is an incredible tragedy, rare as it is.
Ben, will Boeing be involved in this investigation?
Yes, they will. The United States government will be involved and already has sent a team from the National Transportation Safety Board under the international treaties under which accident investigations happen. The state of the manufacturer of the airplane and the engines, which in this case is the United States, will participate as a member of the investigative team, and then Boeing and other experts will serve the U.S. team to give technical expertise. So there are Boeing people already on the scene there who are helping with the investigation.
Who is responsible, Ben, to make certain that the aircraft is well maintained, that it's serviced at the right times, that all its safety features are working?
Generally, that's the airline that's responsible for maintenance and making sure it's airworthy at the time of departure. Right. And then the manufacturer, Boeing, is responsible for making sure that it's, in general, a safe airplane, and that when things are discovered, they get fixed, and that the safety is improved. And then the governments, in this case India and the United States, are responsible for making sure that all those other parties do their job.
Yes. Okay.
But is it correct that sometimes airlines employ foreign contractors, foreign companies for aircraft maintenance? Because
yes,
I did read that in this case there was a Turkish company which was contracted.
Right. It's definitely true. It's a worldwide industry, and whenever an airline contracts with anyone else, they have to send observers to make sure that their procedures are being followed and being done right.
Okay, I'm sure we'd hear a lot more in the days ahead. We're going to have to leave it there for now. Thank you to all of you for being with us. Well, that's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.